Hi, welcome to the Web Report. My name is Stuart Webb. Today I wanted to talk about a video that has been going around. It came out recently on Jubilee. It's one atheist versus 25 Christians, where essentially 25 Christians try to convince an atheist, Alex O'Connor, to believe in God. And in watching this, I watched about 20 minutes of it, and I'm going to try to watch the whole thing. And I'm probably going to respond to a couple parts of it. But what I found is that this person, Alex O'Connor, is very intelligent, very competent, and he's an atheist. And while he thinks that he's very reasonable in his positions, his arguments they're just not compelling. And I'm going to go through this. I'll probably do a couple of different parts of this, but I just wanted to play kind of just the beginning of it and the claim that he makes, and just wanted to respond to it a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that.
My first claim is that suffering makes God's existence unlikely. Good work.
Hey, Alex, how's it going?
How's it going? Nice to meet you.
Sage. Why don't you just begin? Why is suffering or evil make God's existence unlikely?
I think when confronted with two hypotheses, so atheism, naturalism, or theism, we should ask what we expect would occur under either hypothesis. And then we look at the world and we see what does actually occur. And what do we find? We find, I think most relevant here, a system of natural selection, the mechanism by which God apparently chose to bring animals and ultimately human beings into existence. A system which is defined by suffering. Survival of the fittest is the same thing as the death and suffering and destruction of the unfit. I'm told that the very mechanism that God chose to bring about the human species as the ultimate end of his creation was one that is imbued with suffering, such that 99.9% of all the species, let alone animals, that have ever existed on planet Earth have been brutally wiped from existence into extinction. And I think that that's less likely on theism. If you assume atheism or materialism, not only do you explain this, you also come to expect it.
What is your...
Not going to let the other guy respond, because ultimately I think that everyone has pretty good responses, but I think the Christians, their responses are based off of things that are so obvious that it's hard to even put them in words. So I'm just going to go up to the scriptures in 2 Nephi chapter 2, and this, in my opinion, is kind of self-evident. It's obvious to most people that are willing to just accept the light of Christ that's in their heart, because we're all born with it. And it says right here, verse 25, Adam fell that men might be, and men are that they may have joy. Now, that statement, I believe, refutes that claim, because Alex O'Connor thinks that if God was real, then there wouldn't be suffering. Well, I believe that his argument, my argument is the exact opposite. Because there is suffering, that we have to pass through sorrow to know joy, it's obvious that there is a God. And in order to know joy, like it says here in the scriptures, Adam fell that men might be, and men are that they may have joy. That is the purpose, ultimately, is for us to have joy. And the only way for us to know joy and to have joy is to pass through suffering. So my claim is the exact opposite of his, and I think it's just obvious and self-evident. That's why I think it's kind of, there's a struggle. And while this conversation, everyone's very cordial, which I love, and respectful of each other. But the Christians, our arguments they're just so obvious, and the scriptures lay them out very clearly. But even it's very simple. You cannot remain, if you want to progress. You have to experience things, right? To have joy, you have to know the opposite, right? The scriptures lay this out very well, and it's actually very simple. But in a few verses before verse 25, it says, "And now behold, if Adam had not transgressed, he would have not fallen, and he would have remained in the Garden of Eden, and all things which were created must have remained in the same state in which they were after they were created, and they must have remained forever and had no end. And they would have had no children, wherefore they would have remained in a state of innocence, having no joy, for they knew no misery, doing no good, for they knew no sin. Behold, all things have been done in the wisdom of him who knoweth all things, God. Okay? And then it continues, Adam fell that men might be, and men are that they may have joy. The whole purpose for suffering is that we will have joy. And we can't know joy or have joy without experiencing suffering. So, I only played a tiny little clip of this because I'm going to go through it hopefully in sections and break it down. But and I'm not going to respond to all of it. But the scriptures are right there telling us why we're here. Okay. And it's just reiterating what really we already know, because these things are inherent in us. They're self-evident. It's kind of like we all know in our hearts that it's wrong to murder an innocent person just out of nowhere. We recognize in our hearts that that's wrong, right? Because it's self-evident. We're born with the light of Christ. There's certain things that we know in our heart to be wrong. And the reason why we're here is kind of self-evident too, right? There is a God. The purpose is so we can pass through sorrow to know joy, and to choose good or evil. Okay, that's self-evident as well. So, I think the claim it's kind of hard to respond like in a secular way to make arguments for something that's so obvious. If there's no God, then there is absolutely no purpose for our life. There really isn't, because that means that there's not life after death. There's no resurrection. There's no life after death. And there's no purpose for life, and so and there's no judgment. That's what I was getting at. There's no judgment, right? If there's no judgment, then there really is no purpose. There's no purpose for any of this stuff. Okay, and so I think it's pretty obvious, pretty self-evident, and these things can be answered through Scripture, and through what God has revealed to us through Scripture, but also in our heart. We're all born with it. While this conversation is interesting, it's the all atheist arguments, they're just not compelling. Because they're not compelling because you're trying to convince someone that their life does not mean anything. There's no meaning or purpose to it, and it's just not a compelling argument. It's almost anything is more compelling than that. Like trying to convince someone that Buddhism's true, or some other theology is true than the one maybe you believe in, right? Because that has a purpose, right? There's usually a purpose to it. Atheism, there's absolutely the argument is only that you as a person have no purpose. And also, when he talks a lot about animals, and what would be the purpose of an animal suffering? Well, animals are put on this earth for our benefit, for us to have dominion over. That's what their purpose is. Okay. And men are that they may have joy. That's why we're here. The worth of souls is great. We are made in the image of God. We are divine creatures, and we have a purpose. We have meaning. There is a meaning to our life, to our choices, and there will be a judgment. So that's the key right there. Those things give our life purpose. Okay, so that we have joy at the end of this. And it's just very interesting. Alex O'Connor, very intelligent guy, clearly. He's using his reason and intellect that God gave him to argue against his own existence. He's using it to argue that his life, the fact that he's debating people right now, like none of that matters in his view. Like his life has no purpose. So his debate, him trying to convince people, like like based on his view, based on his own theology, his own or lack of theology, based on his own opinion, none of it matters, and it's just not compelling. These things are not compelling. So I'm going to keep responding to a couple of parts of this, but it's just very interesting. Life has meaning. God exists. What we do matters, and there is good and evil, etc., and so on and so forth.